Hi guys, welcome. And in this video I wanted to do a little tutorial showing you guys how to create this snake game using Python and pygame. So let me just show you what we're going to be creating today. So this snake game has this startup screen, which you have two buttons in here. So you have start button, quit button, and also you can see you have a high score. So every time you finish the game, this score is saved on a text file, as you can see here. Let me make this a bit bigger, and this one as well. So now the high score is 13, so it's going to be showing in here. I'm just going to change this to a bit less so I can show you how it works. So when I start the game, now the high score is 5, so I can either quit or start. So if I click start, we just start a little, just a normal snake game. I'm very bad at this, but I'm gonna try to get to beat the high score so you can see that it changed it. So that's, I think that's 3, 4, 5. Let's just get a bit more. So if I hit myself, it's game over, and then it shows my score, and then it updates the high score. So I can either start again, or even if I quit, you see that the high score is updated here. So if I start again, it will be showing me a high score of 7. So if I don't get the high score of 7, let me just get like 2 or 3 and then try to kill myself. Yeah. So now I got a score of 3, but the high score is not changed. So in this tutorial, we're going to be using classes, and I just wanted to show you guys also how to organize a bit more your files. So we're going to be using 3 different files. So we have the main, where's the game, where we have the game loop and all of that. And then we're going to have some settings in a different file, and all the classes and sprites we're going to have in a separate different file. Okay, so let's start. I just created a new project in here where we're going to be creating the snake game. I just create a little folder. So inside of this folder, we're going to start by creating a file called main, and then we're going to have another file called settings, and one more file called sprites. And they're all going to be Python files. And as I said before, so we're going to be working with classes. So let's just define some settings first. Let me just make it a bit bigger. And let's make some colors, which they are all going to be tuples of RGB. And as they're going to be all constant, so I'm just going to make the variables all caps. So let's see, white can be 255, 255, 255. Then we're gonna have a dark gray. I don't even know if we're gonna use all of this. Make a space in there. Another tuple. This is gonna be 40, 40, and 40. And let's make it also a light gray because why not? That's gonna be 100, 100, and 100. We make it green, which is gonna be the color of the snake. You can put any color, to be honest. It doesn't really matter too much. So the green is R, G, and B0. And we have blue, which is R0, G0, and blue 255. And let's make a black as well, which is just 0, 0, and 0. And let's also set up some game settings, which are gonna be like the width and the height of the screen. So the one that I'm using right now, I'm using a width of 1024, I think, and the height of 768. You can even make it a square if you wanted to make it as 500, 500. I will tell you why I use the specific numbers because of the grid. Once we build up the grid, as we're gonna be working as a tile based as well. So we're gonna make a speed for the snake. I'll just put 10 for now. And let's make a title. We can just put snake game. And oh, I forgot one color in here. Let's make a background color, which the background is going to be dark gray. And so as I said, we're going to be working with tiles, so let's just define a tile size now as well, which is going to be 32. Yeah, that's why I said we're going to be using, so the width of 1024, so 1024 divided by 32, that's exactly 32 tiles across. And then the 768 divided by 32, that's going to be exactly 24 tiles high. And also I'm gonna define the grid width which is gonna be the width of the screen divided by the tile size. And then let's do the grid height as well, which is the height of the screen divided by the tile size. So let's go into our main file where we're gonna be working with creating the game. So in here we're gonna import, so we're gonna have to import pygame, of course, because we're gonna be working with pygame. And also we're gonna just import all the other files as well. So from the settings files, we're gonna import everything, and then from the sprites files, we're gonna import everything. So let's start with our first class in here. We're going to define a class called game, which is going to hold our game loop, and most of the settings as well. When you start a new game, we're going to define everything in there. So let's define init methods, and it's not going to take any arguments in there. And we're going to start up pygame. So we're going to call pygame.init. Okay, so we're gonna define a screen. We're gonna call self.screen. It's gonna be equals to pygame.display.setMode, and we're gonna pass a tuple inside with the width and the height of this screen. Right? Let me just see. We don't have any errors. All good. And let's just put the title as well. So it's going to be pygame.display.setCaption. And inside of here, we pass the title. And let's just start this up to see what's happening then. So let's create a game object of game. If we do this, you can see the screen. It flashes and it closes. That's because we don't have a game loop yet to keep the screen open. So that's why every time I press, it flashes and then it closes. So let's just create this game loop. So let's create a few functions in here that we're going to be using. So we're going to define a function called new, which is going to create everything for our game. Everything new. So every time you click start button or when you reset your game, it's going to call this function new, and then it's going to start up from the beginning. Then we're going to define a function called run, which is, as the name say, is to run. And also I'm going to define a function called quit, is when you press the little X button on the screen, we're gonna call this function. I'm gonna write this now actually because it's very easy. So we're just gonna call, when you call this function quit, we're gonna call pygame.quit, and then we're just gonna quit with a 0 code so we don't have any errors when we quit the screen. We're going to have a function called update, which is going to be all of our updates, and we're going to have a function called draw, which is going to be all of our draw. And also I want to have another function here that's going to be, I think that's the first one we're going to write, is going to be called draw grid, because we have to draw the grids on this screen. As you see, like on the actual game, you see this grid. So we're gonna draw this grid first. It's gonna be on top of the snake, so we can see the snake divided. And then, yeah, we're gonna draw that one first. At the bottom here, when I create the game, I'm gonna also create a while, not white, while loop. So an infinite while loop. So when we do a while true, it's going to be an infinite while loop until we break out of it. And then we're going to call the game new. So we have a variable called netGame. We instantiate an object of this class game. And now we're calling this object and the function new inside of this object. And then we're also going to call this function called run, which we just created. We just haven't put anything inside of it, but we're gonna write some code soon. And that's it for now. So if I press now, you see that the screen stays open. I can't do anything on it. If I click on it, it just gives me error because I haven't really checked for the events, for the clicks or buttons or anything. So if I click on close, it's gonna be non-responding, but it's a good sign. We already have a screen that doesn't close by itself. So let's handle the events actually. That's one other function that I forgot to put in here. So we're gonna define a function called events. Events, if I can type correctly. And let's just start writing this events function. So this is where we're gonna catch all events, right? For that, we use a for loop. So we're gonna loop through the events in the pygame.event.get. And then we're gonna see if the event, actually I'm gonna take this s out, so we call event in pygame. So if the event dot type is equals to pygame.quit. So pygame.quit is one event from pygame. So that means we're pressing the X button on our window. So then we're gonna call our self.quit. So we're gonna call this function event inside of our run function. So inside of the run function, we're gonna set a variable in here. So this is gonna be our game loop. So this loop here is to keep the window open and is to keep running the window, but we're gonna set some other variables in here so we can see the main screen and then the game over screen as well. Now this function here, the run inside of our game class, is the actual game loop, is what's gonna keep the game looping so you can keep the snake moving around and eating the food and all of that. So this is actually the game loop. So we're going to set a variable here, self.playing. We're gonna set that to true. Set self.playing to false to end the game, right? So we have this variable, and then we're gonna do a while loop here, while self.playing. And in here we're gonna call self.events, and we're gonna call self.updates and self.draw as well. So every time the game loops, we're gonna check for the events. if we have any button press, if we have any mouse movements, or if we have any mouse clicks. Then we're gonna update everything, and then we're gonna draw into the screen again. Just before we test this, we're going to just set a clock in here. So we can, I'm not gonna be using delta time on this, I'm just gonna be using the clock just for the frame rate. But our frame rate is actually gonna be the speed that we set in here. So our frame rate is gonna be 10. It's actually just the speed of the snake. So if you want the snake to be faster, you can increase this. Pygame has a built-in clock as well, so we're just going to create a variable for the clock, and we're going to call it pygame.time.clock, and that's a function, so we need a bracket. And also in here, just before the event, we're going to call the clock.tick, and we're going to pass the speed inside. Okay, so now I believe we can test this. If I run my window, let me see. So now I can drag the window. So now it's not, if I click anything, if I press any keys, it's still responding. So it's checking for all these events. And if I click on the close, you see we close it and we exit with a code 0. That's why we put this code 0 in here. If I don't put this, when I try to close the window, it just doesn't really exit, so it gives you a pygame error. So that's why we use the quit code 0 in there. Try again. See, exit with a code 0. Okay, so I think the next part we're gonna try to do, let's draw the grid actually. We're gonna be using the pygame.draw function and line. So we're gonna be drawing lines into the screen, right? And so to draw a line, the first argument we have to pass is the actual screen. So we need to pass the display where we want to draw this line. And then the second argument is the color. So we're gonna be using light gray for that. And then the other two arguments are a tuple of coordinates. So let me just demonstrate this. So the first parenthesis here, the first tuple is going to be a coordinate. So if we're drawing a line, right? Sorry for my very straight line. So the first coordinate here is going to be the coordinates of this point of the line, and then the second is going to be the coordinate of this point of the line. So we have two tuples with two coordinates, and then we have to pass those two coordinates. So this is the first one, the second one, and then it just draws a line in between those 2 points. So let me just do a quick line here. So we're just going to pass like 100, 100, and 200, 200. So if we try to run this now, you're not going to see anything yet. It's just because we're not calling this function. We're not drawing into the screen. So we're calling the function draw, but we're not calling the draw grid. So we do need to pass this function in here. Oops, self.drawGrid. But it still is not going to show anything. It's because we need to flip this screen. So every time we update. And then when we get to the draw function, if we just draw this in the screen, nothing's going to happen. That's because we need to call this function called pygame.display.flip. So we need to flip this screen, right? So now we can see that the line that we just draw. So you see I used 100 and 100 for the first coordinates. So it's starting on the top left corner, we have 0, 0. So 100 on the X and 100 on the Y, that's about here. And then I put 200, so 200 on the X, 200 on the Y, that's about here, and it draws the line. So if I change this, for example, to 100, and then we run again, now you see that it's a vertical line. Because we have the second point here, we are using the same X, but we're using a different Y. So that's what we're gonna be using to draw these lines on the screen. But we're gonna do that in a loop method, so we don't need to draw 32 lines into the screen and repeating code. So for that, we're gonna be doing a for loop. So we need two for loops actually, for the rows and for the columns, right? Because we want a grid. So we're gonna be doing a for loop for row in range, and then in here we're gonna be saying that we're gonna start in 0, and we're gonna go all the way to the width, so to the right side of the screen, and then we're gonna skip by tile size. Every 32 pixels, because we set here that the tile size is 32, so every 32 pixels we're gonna be drawing a line, right? And we're gonna go from 0, from the width 0, which is the left of the screen, until the width. So, and in here for the coordinates, and the first coordinate for the line, so as I did this in here, let me just do this. So we're gonna be drawing lines down like this, right? So we need to check those coordinates of the first point in here. So these points, they're always gonna be 0 on the Y, because we're drawing on the top here. And then the second point, it's gonna be the maximum, so it's gonna be the height, right? So the first one here, we're gonna call it the row, which we're gonna be skipping every 32 pixels. And the second number here is gonna be 0, because they're always 0. We're calling the Y 0. And then on the second one, it's gonna be the same, it's gonna be the row, and instead of 0, it's gonna be the height. So let's run this and let's see. Okay, so now we have all the lines going down. So we have all vertical lines, right? And now we need to do exactly the same thing, but for the horizontal lines, so we can see the grid on the screen. So let's do another for loop, which is gonna be for column in range. Then we're gonna go from 0 to the height this time. So we're gonna go from top to bottom. So we're gonna be drawing these lines here, right? So we go from the 0 to the height, and then we're gonna be skipping by tile size again. And then inside there, we're gonna do the draw line again. We're gonna pass the self.screen and a color of light gray, and then 2 tuples inside. So the first tuple, it's almost the same as this, but now the x of the first coordinates, it's always going to be 0, because that's the beginning of the line, right? So the x is always going to be 0, and then the second coordinates, the x is going to be the width, and then the other coordinate is going to be the column. So in here we're going to pass x0 and then a column, and then in here we're going to pass the width and the column. Okay, so if we run this, now we have a grid. Okay, so I think now the next step is gonna be to create the sprites. So let's go into our sprites document. Just make this a little bit bigger. And in the sprites document, again, we're gonna have to import pygame, because we're gonna be using pygame in here. And we're also gonna import the settings. So from settings, import all. Okay, so the first class we're gonna be creating is gonna be a class called snake, and this class is gonna take some properties. It's gonna inherit from the pygame.sprite, no scrap, sprite.sprite. So we're gonna take some properties from this class sprite from the pygame module. Okay, so let's just define an init for it. And in here we're gonna take the game, because we're gonna be using the game, the class game in this sprite as well. And we're gonna take an x and y for coordinates. So every time we initialize a sprite's snake class, we have to pass the game, and then we have to pass an x and a y on the grid. Where is that gonna be? And in here we have to call the superclass sprite. So we're gonna call sprite.sprites.init, and then we pass the self, and we're gonna be using a group as well. So let me just create a variable called self.groups. Oops, self.groups equals game.allSprites. The advantage of using this, I'll explain in a bit. So the advantage of using this, taking some properties from this class sprite, is that we can use groups. So we can group all the sprites together. So all the class, we're gonna have some other classes here taking from this, so we can put all of those classes into this sprite, and then every time we update on our update in here and to draw, we can update all of the classes at once and draw all of them at once, all the objects, sorry. So we don't need to create like for loops for every object and call them individually, so we can just update the class, update the group, and we will update all of the classes at once. So what else do we need in here? As we're passing the game, we're gonna need the self.game, which is equals to the game, and let's also do self.x and self.y equals x and y. So if you didn't know, you can do this. You can pass two variables divided by a comma. It's equal two things divided by a comma as well. So if you do x and y equals 10 and 20, the x is going to take the value of 10 and the y is going to take the value of 20. So that's just a better way of writing in a single line. In this snake class, we're going to have a function called update. We're not going to put anything on it yet. And also we're gonna have a function called body collision. This body collision function is gonna check if the head of the snake hits the body. Then we need to do a game over. We need to end the game. After the game, we call this, and then we need to create an image. So self.image is going to be equals to pygame.surface. So we have to create a surface for it. And inside of that is a tuple with the size of our surface. So the size is going to be the tile size by the tile size, because it's going to be a little square, right? And we're going to set this image color to green. You can use any color in here. That's just gonna be the color of the snake, of the little squares of the snake. And we're also gonna be using a rect in here. So we're gonna do self.rect is equals to self.image.getRect. Okay, and then now in the update class, we need to just update the self.rect x and the self.rect y. So the x is going to be self.x. So we're taking the coordinates here and we're going to time that to the tile size. So it's just a bit easier for us. So if you pass a coordinates of 2 and 2, then that means it's going to be on the, let me just run this. So if you pass a coordinate of 2 and 2, that means the snake is going to be drawn on the second tile. So you have 1, 2, and then 1, 2. It's going to be on the second tile. If you pass 10, 10, it's going to be on the 10 tile. So we don't need to worry about how many pixels we need to move and that's gonna make more sense as well when we start moving the sprites, because we're gonna move them by tile size. So then this one as well, self.y times tile size.